Welcome, friends. Today's story will touch your heart deeply. It was a freezing winter morning. Snow was falling slowly from the sky. A young girl sat alone at a bus stop, shivering in the cold. Her clothes were thin, her hands were numb, and her eyes were filled with sadness. She had nothing, no money, no warmth, and no one to care for her. People passed by, but no one even looked at her. She lowered her head, trying to hide her tears. The world seemed cold and heartless. Then suddenly a small voice came from in front of her. "Miss, are you okay?" She looked up. In front of her stood a little girl, maybe 5 years old, wearing a pink jacket and a grey hat. She was holding a small cup of hot chocolate in her tiny hands. "You look very cold," the little girl said softly. "My daddy says we should always help people who need warmth." The woman couldn't stop her tears. She slowly took the cup with shaking hands. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. The little girl looked into her eyes with a kind smile and said something that made the woman freeze for a moment. "Can you be my mommy? I don't have one, but you look like someone who needs love too." The woman's heart broke. She put the cup down and hugged the little girl tightly. Tears rolled down her face, but for the first time, those tears felt warm. A man walked slowly toward them. He was the little girl's father. He looked at the woman with gentle eyes and said she always missed her mother. "Maybe fate brought us here today." The woman looked up, speechless. The snow kept falling, but now it felt peaceful. 3 hearts found something they were missing: love, warmth, and hope. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel Soul of Kindness. The next morning, the city was still covered in snow. The woman woke up in a small shelter where the man had dropped her off last night after giving her a warm meal and a blanket. She still couldn't believe what had happened. A stranger's kindness, a child's pure heart, and that innocent question echoing in her mind. "Can you be my mommy?" She sat by the small window, looking at the falling snow, whispering to herself, "Why would that child say that to me? Why me?" Her heart ached. She had lost everything months ago. Her job, her home, and even her family. Life had turned into a blur of cold nights and hungry mornings. Just then a knock came at the door. She hesitated but opened it slowly. It was the same man and his little daughter. The man smiled gently and said, "We were nearby and thought you might need breakfast." The girl ran forward, holding a small paper bag. "I brought you pancakes," she said, her face glowing with joy. The woman smiled faintly and took the bag. She sat down beside them, and for the first time in months, she felt like she belonged somewhere. The little girl laughed and fed her pieces of pancake with her tiny hands. The man watched quietly. "You remind me of my wife," he said softly. "She passed away 3 years ago. Since then, my daughter hasn't smiled like this." The woman froze, her eyes wide. She looked at the girl, so full of love and innocence. Her heart filled with something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. Tears welled up in her eyes as she whispered, "Your wife must have been a wonderful woman." He nodded slowly. "She was. And I believe she would have wanted me to help others the way she did." For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the sound of the child's soft laughter echoed. The woman realized that sometimes life takes everything away just to give something far more meaningful back. When they stood up to leave, the girl hugged her tightly again. "Don't be sad," she said. "Daddy said we'll come again tomorrow." As they walked away through the falling snow, the woman stood by the door, holding the cup the child had brought her. It was still warm, just like her heart. She whispered to herself, "Maybe this is where my life starts again." Days passed, and the bond between the woman, the little girl, and her father grew stronger. Every morning they came to visit her, bringing food, warm clothes, and smiles. The bus stop, which once felt cold and empty, had now become a place of warmth and laughter. The little girl would run toward her every day, shouting happily, "Mommy!" Even though the woman had never truly answered that question. But each time she heard it, something deep inside her healed a little more. One day, the man invited her to join them for lunch at their home. She hesitated, afraid, unsure if she belonged, but the little girl held her hand and said, "Please come. I made cookies for you." She couldn't say no. When she entered their small but cozy home, she felt overwhelmed. The smell of freshly baked bread, the family pictures on the wall, the soft laughter. It was everything she had once lost. The man noticed her tears and said softly, "You don't have to thank us. You've already given us something precious." She looked confused. "What could I possibly give?" He smiled gently. "You brought back my daughter's happiness. I thought I lost that forever." The little girl came running with a photo frame. It was a picture of her late mother. "You look just like her," the child said. "That's why I asked if you could be my mommy." The woman's hands trembled as she held the photo. She saw the kindness in the woman's eyes, the same kindness she saw in the little girl. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "She was beautiful," she whispered. The man nodded. "Yes, and she always believed that when you help someone, you heal yourself too." They all sat at the table, eating together like a family. The woman smiled for the first time in a long while. She laughed with the little girl, helped her with her food, and listened as the man told stories of his late wife. For a moment, it didn't feel like she was a guest. It felt like home. After lunch, the man offered her a small job at his family's flower shop. "You don't have to stay at the shelter anymore," he said. "You deserve a chance to stand again." She covered her mouth, speechless. I don't know what to say." "Just say yes," the little girl interrupted with a giggle, hugging her tightly. The woman broke down in tears, hugging her back. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." That night, as she lay in her new room above the flower shop, she looked out the window at the softly falling snow. The world outside was still cold, but inside her heart, something had changed forever. She whispered to herself, "Maybe God sent them to remind me that love finds us when we least expect it." Weeks passed, and the woman's life began to bloom again, just like the flowers she arranged every morning in the little shop. Her hands, once numb with cold and pain, now held life, color, and fragrance. The man often came by to help her lift heavy boxes, and the little girl never left her side. Every day felt like a new beginning. She woke up early, made breakfast with the little girl, and together they opened the shop. The child loved helping her make bouquets. "Mommy," she would whisper shyly, "can we make one for the sky today, so my real mommy can see it?" Her heart melted each time. They would tie a ribbon around the flowers and release them into the cold morning air. Watching the flowers drift upward, the woman would silently pray, not just for the little girl's mother, but for her own lost soul too. One evening, as snow began to fall again, the woman stayed late at the shop, finishing an order. The man arrived quietly and placed a small box on the counter. "For you," he said softly. She looked surprised. "What is this?" "Just open it," he smiled. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a tiny charm shaped like a heart. On it was engraved, "For the warmth you brought back into our lives." She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. He stepped closer. "You deserve much more. You gave my daughter a mother's love again, and me a reason to believe in happiness." She couldn't speak. Her voice broke as she said, "You both saved me when I had nothing." He smiled softly. Sometimes saving others is how we save ourselves. Just then the little girl ran in, her face glowing with joy. "Daddy, Mommy! Look, it's snowing again!" The woman froze for a moment. "Mommy." This time it didn't feel like a dream. It felt real. She bent down, hugged the little girl tight, and whispered, "Yes, my love. Mommy's here." The man's eyes filled with tears as he watched them. He took a deep breath and said, "I've been meaning to ask you something." The woman looked up. "What is it?" He smiled nervously. "Would you like to make it official? Would you like to stay with us? Not as a guest, as family." Her hands covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't speak, only nod. The little girl squealed with happiness and jumped into her arms. The snow kept falling outside, wrapping the world in white silence. Inside the shop, 3 hearts held each other close, broken souls that had finally found home. That night the woman sat by the window, watching the snow sparkle under the streetlights. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone. She whispered, "Thank you, God, for giving me a family again." A year passed. The cold bus stop where it all began was now just a memory, a place that had witnessed pain, hope, and rebirth. The woman, now filled with peace and purpose, walked hand in hand with the little girl through the same street, snow softly falling around them. But this time, she wasn't shivering. She wasn't alone. She had a home and a family. The flower shop had grown busier than ever. People loved the warmth she brought to every bouquet, every smile, every word she spoke. Locals often said, "There's something about her. Flowers, they feel like they carry love itself." She would just smile and whisper, "Because they do." One winter morning, she placed a small note beside the counter that read, "No one is ever truly alone. Sometimes kindness finds you when you stop searching for it." That same day, as she looked out the window, she saw a young boy sitting alone at the bus stop, shivering, lost, just like she once was. Without a second thought, she put on her coat, grabbed a cup of hot chocolate and walked toward him. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked gently. The boy looked up, frightened and silent. She smiled warmly, sat beside him and handed him the cup. "It's cold out here," she said softly. "Drink this. You'll feel better." The boy took a sip, his little hand shaking. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispered. At that moment, the man and the little girl arrived behind her. The girl ran and hugged her tightly. "Mummy, what are you doing?" She smiled and said, "Just helping someone who reminds me of who I once was." The man placed his hand on her shoulder. "And that's why we love you," he said quietly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the boy again, remembering the day her life had changed because of one small act of kindness. She whispered to herself, "This is how miracles begin. Not with money, not with power, but with a simple heart that chooses love." The boy smiled for the first time, and the woman felt something deep inside. The circle of kindness was complete. The same bus stop that once gave her despair now gave her purpose. As they walked back together, the woman, the little girl, and the man, snowflakes danced around them like blessings from the sky. The little girl looked up and said, "Mommy, do you think angels can see us?" The woman smiled through her tears. "Yes, my love. I think they're smiling right now." The man wrapped his arm around them both as they disappeared down the snowy street, a family not made by blood, but by compassion and fate. And on the bench at the bus stop, a single flower lay in the snow, a reminder that love, once planted, never truly fades. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel, Soul of Kindness, where every story reminds you that even in the coldest winter, kindness still blooms.